Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Hi, J.R. Welcome to Capital Notes.
Thanks for having me.
So, Wisconsin's spring election was last month, and in Milwaukee, 269 mail-in ballots arrived too late to be counted. Under Wisconsin law, ballots have to be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day to be counted. These ballots arrived the day after the election. State election officials had warned voters about mail delays due to a new postmark rule, Postal Service staffing shortages, and other budget cuts. They have recommended returning ballots by mail no later than 10 days before an election. What do you see as the response to this?
Well, a couple of things. One, it puts more onus on the voter to get things in earlier. Way back when, years and years ago, you could request a ballot and get it returned within like a week. It wasn't that big a deal. That's changed a great deal. So now you're seeing greater efforts or emphasis on early in-person voting, a little more secure in terms of your ballot into the clerk on time. And then two, just an education campaign to people of, hey, if you're going to mail it back, you better mail it back at least a week, if not a week and a half before the election, just be on the safe side.
As of late 2025, the beginning of this year, the USPS postmark rule change means that mail is often postmarked when processed at a regional facility, not when it's actually dropped off by the mailer. How effective have governments and voter rights groups been about getting the word out about new rules and how to approach sending in ballots?
I've seen a little bit of it. There hasn't been a huge election. No offense to the spring race that we just had in April, but there hasn't been a massive election where everybody was fully engaged in like voter education or outreach and that kind of stuff. So I guess what I'm watching more is what we see this fall, because we're going to see, 2.5 million votes cast. I'm just kind of guessing right now, but somewhere in that neck of the woods, how are they going to do? Like, what's the focus going to be for these groups trying to turn people out in terms of educating them on what they have to do to get their ballots back in time?
And do you expect that messaging to step up in the coming months?
Probably. It depends on how these groups feel like voters are picking up on things, if they're getting it. Obviously, if ballots are arriving late, not everybody's getting the message just yet.
And do you see that election integrity drumbeat becoming an issue in Wisconsin as we get closer to the November election? Have any politicians or groups on either side of the aisle been active on this issue?
Oh, we had conversation in the Capitol all session long about Monday processing. That's with absentee ballot. That's where right now, you can't even open the ballot on an absentee vote until the morning election when the polls open. There's been an argument made that if you could just begin opening those ballots and processing, not counting them, but processing them, you could speed up the entire thing. So on election night, we're not getting returns from places like Milwaukee or Green Bay that have central count facilities for the absentee ballots at like 3 o'clock in the morning. People would feel more confident if they saw the results kind of come in before they go to bed. But Republicans, even those who acknowledge that would help a great deal, have tried to pair that requirement with all these other provisions that would make Donald Trump happy, and Democrats won't agree to it. They say those things aren't actually required and that they would actually hurt voters and trying to turn them out. So they can't get anything agreed to. So there's been a conversation, but no real progress on trying to do anything about the perceptions of Wisconsin's elections in the last 2 years.
Also on that election discussion, Law Forward filed a new lawsuit last week in Dane County Circuit Court on behalf of 2 Madison voters. Their legally cast absentee ballots were counted on Election Day, and then they were ordered thrown out by the Wisconsin Elections Commission weeks later because the Madison clerk's office delivered the ballots to their polling places minutes after polls closed. And, ballots have to be counted on Election Day. They were 2 of 23 ballots. Anything different we should know about this?
So it's an interesting case because the ballots were returned in time The clerk just didn't get into the polling place to be counted in time. So that is clear black letter law in Wisconsin that your absentee ballot has to be returned by 8 p.m. on election night. Okay, that is clear. What does that mean, though? So if your vote, and now, again, places like Milwaukee, Green Bay have a central count for absentee ballots. They all go to one place. They're all counted there. Madison sends its ballots, absentee ballots, out to the polling place where the voter would have cast the ballot anyway. If they show up in person, they're counted there. So if you have the ballot, and all 23 ballots were there the day before the election, all right, in the clerk's office. They didn't get them out to those polling places until these 23 until after 8 p.m. So what's the deadline, right? And this was total clerk error. The voters made no mistakes here returning their ballots. And that's kind of this interesting legal argument. Do you punish the voter for an administrative error? And this is pure clerk error in this case. It's going to be interesting how the courts deal with this or how they interpret it going forward. But it's not a great look for Madison too, when just in November they misplaced more than 190 absentee ballots. Right? Remember this whole thing where they just didn't track them properly and they weren't turned in on time. They weren't counted before the canvass was done. So they've got some administrative issues in Madison that they need to get figured out, and it's not a great look for them.
This is Capital Notes. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross of WisPolitics.com. Okay, so moving on, members of the state GOP's governing committee were trying to organize a special meeting this week to discuss employment issues, likely regarding GOP state chair Brian Schimming. Republicans have been criticizing him over the party's fundraising, which has trailed Democrats. This was set to happen a few days before the state GOP convention this upcoming weekend, but it's been canceled. What's going on here?
Look, there's a rift within the party administration. Brian Schimming has been chair now for a few years. The party, when Donald Trump is on the ballot, has done okay. When Donald Trump is not on the ballot, it's got challenges. I mean, that's just a reality of what's happening here for Republicans in Wisconsin, that Trump drives a train for them electorally. And when he's not in the ballot, they've struggled in elections. They've also struggled financially compared to the state Democratic Party. And Brian is the first paid chair in memory to lead the party. So if you're paid to raise money and you're not raising money, what do you do? So there are these folks who want to try and either pressure Brian to get out or force him out or do something, have some change leadership. They've got a couple of issues. One, they don't really have an alternative right now. For my calls with British Republicans, there's not a clear person who would step into that role who would do better than what Brian is doing. And two, how do you have a functioning party that is a partner for Tom Tiffany as he runs for governor? Now, the state convention coming up this weekend, I think it's Saturday, we're going to have the endorsement vote. We expect Tiffany to get endorsed by the state party. Once that happens, you could argue Tom Tiffany is the leader of the Republican Party in some ways, right, as their nominee or their endorsed candidate for governor. Can Tiffany have a good partner in the state GOP? Because remember, political parties in Wisconsin can take unlimited donations from contributors and then make unlimited transfers to candidates. If you're Tiffany, you can go out and pitch to donors of, hey, once you've maxed out to me your $20,000, you can still go give money to the state party. Then they can give me a big transfer to help me pay for TV ads and infrastructure. Republicans and Democrats do things differently in Wisconsin. The Democratic Party has got more of a ground game operation that it pitches to donors as, hey, you want to come fund us to help us keep turning out voters to build this infrastructure. Republicans don't have the same kind of ground game from the party, but it can be a good partner for Tiffany financially in this pass-through system. You still have to have, donors have confidence in the party to accomplish that, and B, see a path for Tiffany to win, to want to give the party money to then pass on to Tiffany. So they need to get their stuff together, basically. They've got a convention coming up. Will they be unified after that? Will endorsing Tom Tiffany for governor, Eric Toney's running for attorney general, will endorsing candidates now give them like a clear, okay, it's time to focus on the big picture of winning in November? Or will they be beset by these kind of like squabbles about the party administration, and will it kind of hamper their efforts to be a good partner for these guys come fall?
And sticking with upcoming elections, Wisconsin has new legislative maps as of 2 years ago. Democrats made gains in the legislature. The current makeup of the assembly is 54-45. And with that backdrop, GOP State Representative Jessie Rodriguez of Oak Creek announced last week that she won't seek re-election to her swing seat this fall. She said she wants to give more time to her family after nearly 14 years in the legislature. What's notable about this?
Well, she's one of 5 Republicans who represent seats that Donald Trump took fewer votes than Kamala Harris in 2024. Now, 2024 was not a great environment for Democrats. So if you're talking, you're in a Harris seat as a Republican and you held on then, but now you've got a bad environment for Republicans in 2026, if that comes to pass, that's that much tougher. And if you're a Republican, it's easier to hold a seat like that if you have an incumbent running. Jessie is the second incumbent in a Harris seat, Republican incumbent in a Harris seat, to say I'm not running again. Dean Crawford announced he wasn't running last week. Those are the 2 toughest seats for Republicans to defend on the pure numbers. Looking at what Trump got in 2024 compared to Harris in those seats, they're the toughest 2. Rodriguez is in the suburb of Milwaukee. Crawford's the Needham-Menasha area. Okay, so if you're a Republican, that narrows your path to hold the majority this fall. You've also got to defend Ben Franklin up in Green Bay, a freshman, in a Harris seat. Todd Novak down southwestern Wisconsin in a Harris seat. And Bob Donovan in the Milwaukee suburbs in a Harris seat. Okay, so one, for Republicans, do you have a good candidate to replace Dean or Jessie that are worth investing in? If you don't get a great candidate, do you really put money in those seats because how tough they are? And if you don't contest those seats, Democrats say, hey, we're in good shape here. We can divert more money from we're going to spend against Dean and Jessie to go after Bob and Todd and Ben, right? So it makes it tougher. That's just a reality for Republicans that they're facing a little bit of a headwind right now, actually a lot of a headwind right now. And 2, that they're losing quality candidates in key seats that they would rather have to defend them. Now, it doesn't mean they can't win, but it just makes it that much harder when you have this going on in this environment.
Interesting stuff. Okay, well, thanks for this background, JR. And as always, thanks for joining me on Capital Notes.
Anytime.
That was JR Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on lake effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.